Hey, future lawyer. Welcome to the LSAT Simplified podcast presented by Hey Future Lawyer, where we talk about all things LSAT, law school admissions, and otherwise. If you want to check out our free LSAT course, go to heyfuturelawyer.com to sign up for a free account today. Hey, everyone. Happy Labor Day weekend. Law school applications open tomorrow on Labor Day. So I thought this would be a good time to get out there and basically just talk about how applications go. There's a lot of nonsense when it comes to applications, and it's honestly frustrating to see, partly because people think that it's much harder to get into law school than it is. And a lot of this is due to the online resources. Some of the online resources are just, for lack of a better term, filled with the blind leading the blind. Specifically, this is Reddit. r/law school admissions is a great poster child of Dunning-Kruger. It's a lot of people who have been exposed to admissions very briefly, and they've learned a few things, enough to the point where they know much more than someone just looking into the process. But people often take this and extrapolate and assume they know a lot about law school admissions to a point where they draw some very incorrect conclusions with authority. Because they identify as someone who now understands the process, which is true compared to a true novice, they think they're an expert. And the reality is they're not experts. r/law school admissions is a very bad source of knowledge. And I had on my agenda to hit on myths. I will tease them. I'm not sure we're going to get through them today, because what I want to do today is talk about my cycle last year with everyone I worked with and just talk about them very abstractly and talk about their numbers, where they got in. It should give you an idea of what you can expect if you have decent numbers, and it will be a lot better than Reddit. Part of this is because I'm awesome at admissions and I help people get their best outcomes. But these are not extraordinary outcomes. Yet, if you post these on r/law school admissions, you would think I'm like God's gift to admissions consulting because I just get everyone into the top schools that their numbers would allow. The reality is that it is not as hard as Reddit will make you think. Reddit is filled with antisocial, awkward weirdos. They write like weirdos and they put everyone off in their admissions. Further, applying early matters. I mean, we're not going to get into applying early because I have it on my list to do a whole myth busting episode. I think that'll be next week's episode of the podcast, or maybe we'll hit it today if I fly through the recaps. But the basic idea is that applying early actually does matter. It gets incredibly underplayed for a few reasons. One, applicants always say that applying early does not matter. The reason for this is because many of them are not ready to apply early. So what they do to reassure each other is say, it doesn't matter to apply early. I can apply early. Someone else told me it's okay. Therefore, it is okay. And then they tell someone. So what ends up happening is it becomes this circular reinforcing mechanism of applicants telling each other it's fine to apply late. And then further, LSAT tutors, admissions consultants, law schools, they tell you it's fine because they want your money. The law schools want your application. Their ranking and their prestige goes up whether they admit you or deny you. So they don't care if you're going to get accepted. They just want you to apply, even if you're a shitty applicant. Law school admissions consultants, they don't want you to not turn to them because it's January. If it's between me, for what's worth, I don't really offer admissions consulting anymore. But let's say I did. If I tell you applying in January is a terrible, shitty plan and that we're going to be fighting an uphill battle, if I tell you that in an admission consult and someone else tells you, no, it's fine, it's going to work out, we're going to kick ass, who are you going to work with? Probably the person who tells you you're going to kick ass. So it is directly incentivized for admission consultants to underplay how much applying late hurts. Also, LSAT tutors. Because if I tell you, hey, if you're aiming for the November LSAT, that is very not ideal, which for what's worth, if you're listening right now, that is the earliest LSAT you could be aiming for that the registration deadline has not passed for. And if I tell you that's not optimal, that is not the ideal plan, people will often go to other LSAT prep that is going to make them feel good, warm, and fuzzy. Now, I am a big believer in not making you guys feel good, warm, and fuzzy unless it is backed by reality. I'm happy for us to all be positive. I want us to all be happy. I also just am ethically not okay with lying to you guys and telling you that aiming for January or aiming for November is an optimal plan is not. For one, the November LSAT's kind of late. It's not terribly late to the point where your outcomes are awful. But what it does do is it doesn't give you a backup LSAT to take. Because on any given LSAT, you have a roughly 10-point LSAT range. I know I've done this speech many times for those of you that have been longtime listeners, but this is a point that people just do not understand. Your LSAT is not a number. Your LSAT is a range. You could be anywhere from let's say you're averaging 160. That means on a bad day, you score 155. On a good day, you score 165. And let's say you only take November. You could easily have a bad day. You could score 157 by no fault of your own. That's not even your worst day. 30% of your days are going to be a 157 or worse because 155, 156, 157. That is 30% of your 10-point range. So if that happens, and now you're applying with that score, which is 8 points lower than your optimal score, which is a 165, or at least getting into like the mid to high 160, like the mid 160s, like a 163, 164, you are now looking at a 7-ish point difference. You are getting into entirely different classes of law schools. You're paying entirely different prices, and your legal career is entirely different based on variance, randomness, no fault of your own, just the fact that some days you have good days, some days you have bad days. And because you didn't plan ahead, you only gave yourself one chance. And for half the people that take November, they are not going to have a good day because that is how math works. Half of the people perform above average, half of them perform below average. I don't know why this is so hard for people to digest, but that's how averages work. Like half the people do above, half the people do below. It's frustrating. Anyway, and that's assuming November was great, which it's not, but even assuming that it's okay, which let's just operate off the assumption that it's like okay. And I'm not saying okay in like an exciting way. I'm just saying like whatever. I'm not going to battle that November's late. It is late in my mind, but anyway. So that's one thing, which is that you get a lot of false information. Where was I going with this? The whole point of this is doing my recap. So let's go through our recap in alphabetical order. I worked with how many people last cycle? It looks like I worked with, what is that? I'm trying to, 21. So I worked with 21 people, no, 22 people. We're just going to go through them one by one and talk about what happened. This is, oh, you know what? Not 21, because some of these people are not applying. They did not end up applying. So the first off is someone who went to a public university in New York City. I'm not going to give too much detail. She is URM, and her numbers, she had a, let's pull up, a 163 and a 3.8. She is going to Berkeley. You know what? Okay, we're going to pivot. I need to do more prep for this because it's not, I don't have everyone's numbers clearly. So instead of doing the consulting recap, we're going to do that next week. This week, we're going to do the myths because I kind of already started going into it and I'm ready to do it. Whereas if I do the recaps, I'm going to have to, I got to do a little bit more like pulling together their numbers. I thought it would be obvious, but everyone's folder is different. So I have to actually do preparation as opposed to just blabbing. Okay, pivot. So we're going to do the myths of applying. Now I pulled these together and there's about 5 that I have. And the first is that if you don't have both numbers, you're done. This largely comes from Reddit. If you post on Reddit that you have a 167, 3.9, they're going to tell you to kill yourself. I mean, not actually, but they're going to tell you stand no chance. That law school admissions is game over. You are donezo. Look at some crappy school. You're never going to a T14. It is false. I sent many people with 160s to T14s this year. It happens every year. Now, yes, it is harder. I'm not going to pretend that it's easier when you have a 160 some LSAT score as opposed to a 170. But when people tell you that you need to go 175 4.0, it is not rooted in reality. And the math bears this out. If you look at these schools' 509 data, you'll see what their outcomes are. So I will tell you, if you're on Reddit, it becomes very doomer-ish in terms of how hard it is to go to schools. And in fact, I've even talked to some of you who've listened to the podcast. Like one of you DM'd me about numbers, and I had to like kind of correct you because you were like, oh, like with a 172, like you're probably not getting into any T14s. I was like, are you crazy? Like, yes, you are. Now, are you getting into Harvard? Probably not. But you all tend to really overestimate how difficult it is to get in because you've heard these crazy people on Reddit comment that if like you have a 172, you're not going to get into T14. It is false. So anyway, people often really overestimate how difficult it is based upon those comments. I'm going to see if I can find some actually. Like we'll click over to Reddit to see if we can find any stupid comments. I haven't pulled any, so this will be like real time if we're looking at it. But anyways, if you have a high LSAT, you have a chance. Now, if you have a 2.5, are you fucked? Like honestly, probably yes. If you have a 2.9, are you fucked? Honestly, also probably yes, but it's not impossible. With a 3.4, 173, I know someone who had a 3.4, 173 last cycle, and they got into Georgetown, Virginia, and I want to say Michigan. I'm not 100% sure on Michigan, but I know they got into Georgetown and Virginia. So anyway, if you posted on Reddit and said, hey, 173, 3.4, chance me, they would tell you you're delusional. And that person got into the 4th ranked law school in the country with Virginia. So, and for what's worth, some of you might be like, oh, did they have crazy soft factors? The answer is no, they did not have crazy soft factors. False. Like it is not that hard. It is about how well you spend things, not what you have. People, well, this is actually a new myth. And I even know someone who has fallen into this myth, which is that schools are now supposedly prioritizing work experience or prioritizing hireability. That's not a thing. It is a thing said by admissions consultants and by admissions officers to spin a fake narrative that you should apply with your weaker numbers. It is meant to drum up business for the law schools. It is meant to drum up business for the admissions consultants. Then this is a numbers game. And yes, you don't have to be you should not be a psycho. In your admissions essays, you have to make sure you don't come across as a psycho, but that is what they mean by employability. They don't mean, have you had some awesome career? Most of you haven't, transparently. You guys are undergrads, largely. You're 22-year-olds. You guys haven't had impressive careers. That's what law school admissions is. And sure, are there some 27-year-olds applying to law school? Yes. And they also have not had impressive careers, generally speaking. That is why they're applying to law school. Because the people at the top of their game in industry are not going to law school, typically speaking. There are exceptions. I know exceptions. They are not the majority. Most of you are unimpressive. just to be very blunt about it. And this is meant to be encouraging because people often think that they get imposter syndrome because they're like, oh, you have to like be super employable to get into a T14. The answer is no, you just have to be potential. They're not looking for you to be a finished product. They're looking for, do you have potential? And if you are a finished product, sure, that's great. And sure, there are a handful of those people every admission cycle, but it is not the majority. The majority of you are 23-year-olds, 21-year-olds, and you are not impressive. It is about being potential, not about being fully formed. So when people say they're looking at employability, does that mean that someone who's worked 2 to 3 years in corporate America has a leg up over a undergrad who's never worked in the real world? The answer is yes. But the other important caveat that is never really followed up with that is that their LSAT is still a game changer. Because if that person in corporate America has a 169 and the person who's an undergrad has a 170, and one of those is at median and one of those is below median, that means that one of them meets targets and one of them does not. It is so incredibly important how much numbers matter for this process, and people just do not understand it. These 1 point differences are all the differences, whether or not you are at or above target, because they are aiming for certain LSAT and GPA medians. If they hit them, they may maintain or claim their ranking. If they lose them, they may lose their ranking, which means they get fewer applicants, they get less revenue, their school makes less money, and they will likely get, like, they fire deans based on this. So all the nonsense about softs mattering, it's not real. And it's easy to say, and undergrad admission has really painted this picture that your story matters and your narrative matters. And it's not that it doesn't, it's that you can't be a psycho. It is not, are you some elite applicant? It is, are you not a weirdo? And to be fair, this is not a small piece because a lot of people are weirdos. A lot of people really put off admissions officers in their essays and get rejected because they come off as total psychos. But it is not, are you the next coming of Shakespeare? It is, can you write literally? Which, to be fair, is also harder. Like, most of you are much weaker writers. God, I cannot tell you how many of you message me and tell me I'm a strong writer. All of you say that. It is not true for most of you. Most of you are not strong writers. Even those of you that perceive you are. I'm not as strong of a writer as I think I am. But the reality is that if you think you're a strong writer, and I'm talking to you right now, the person who's like, I am a strong writer. The answer is you're probably not as strong as you think you are. You think you are? I promise you're not. It is just one of those things where everyone assumes they are a better writer than they are in reality. And so what happens is everyone's like, I have kick-ass essays. I've never talked to the person who thinks their essays are weak. Everyone thinks their essays are awesome. And people assume that that's going to outperform their numbers. And the reality is, no, it's not. For like 95% of you, it's not going to. It's not going to be the difference. So what I'm really coming back to is your numbers are going to drive this process. Do your essays matter a little bit? Like, yes. But also, who are you to say you have good essays? How many law school essays have you read? I mean, I have a relatively small sample, having read thousands. And so anyway, it's one of those things where I will say, if you think you have good essays, the answer is probably not. Most people's essays suck. I used to do a lot on the podcast, and maybe I'll bring that back just because it's a fun segment. But do not lean on your essays. Do not lean on your work experience. It is not the difference maker you think it is. And a lot of the buzz is not real. The buzz about work experience and employability mattering is not real. Anyway, like I've seen the outcomes cycle after cycle, and it's not a thing. What they mean by employability is, are you some weirdo who's going to set up a protest in front of the campus dean's office? Or are you some weirdo who like says really weird things in interviews? Like, there are things that can get you out, but it's not the holistic process that they're making it out to be. And further, when they're like, oh, the rankings have changed towards employment, therefore employability matters. Well, what are the rankings? Like, how do you affect employment? How can you really tell who's going to be employable based on an application where someone has the resume versus someone who doesn't? It's like, yeah, you can get a little bit of a vibe, but anyway, it's so funny because it's become kind of an accepted truth in the admission zeitgeist. And it's not real. It's fake. It's fugazi. It's made up. Like, the idea that they're really emphasizing like who's employable versus who's not. And for what's worth, I know you can find admission officers saying this. Like, I'm not saying like many of you might be listening and be like, oh, Ben, I heard an admission officer say this. Guys, they are salespeople. They are trying to sell you on applying to their school. These are not sources of information. And so you got to stop treating admissions officers like they're sources of information. Their job is to trick you into their law school. Their job is not to, and further, their job is to sell law school. Like, you guys know, if you've listened to the podcast, I'm not here to sell law school. Law school makes sense for some of you. It does not make sense for some of you. Please talk to an admissions officer who has ever talked about law school salaries, who has ever talked about law school debt, other than saying, oh, it's educational debt. It's good. It's good for you. So, I mean, and for what's worth, I know I lose some people here because people are like, oh, well, they're admissions officers, therefore, right? I hope you guys are smarter than that. I hope you guys can think about incentives. Is Jake, the BMW dealer, your friend? I know he's friendly. I know he smiles at you. Is he looking out for you? Or is his incentive to sell you a car for as much as possible? Law school is the same way. And that doesn't mean they're bad people, but it means that when you take their advice as gospel, it means you're a sucker. So if you're like, oh, I'm going to listen to like Ben is conflicting with the admissions officer advice, it's like, I know I am. I'm saying that that's what I'm doing. Like, I know that my advice often directly conflicts what they're telling you because they're not telling you the truth. Anyway, all my advice is like up for debate too. It's like if you ever hear me say something, you're like, hey, that doesn't track. We believe in arguments here. We don't believe in like authority. Like, I mean, I can say authority. Like I help people underperform their admission cycles every year compared to their number or compared to like the average person with their numbers because I'm not saying I crush them. I'm saying I present the best version of the people I work with and we get them into good schools because it's not that hard when you understand the system. I mean, I could rest on that and say like I get people below median into Harvard every cycle, or I get people into like every T14 every cycle. But I don't feel the need to do that. I feel like my ideas can stand on their own in the battleground of ideas. And the fact that admission officers are not willing to go into the battleground of ideas, I don't know. To me, it's a lot of conclusions without evidence. And that works with a lot of people. In fact, it's something I realize I don't even have to give. I tend to over explain myself. I tend to give a lot of reasons. I tend to really give the arguments, which I think for smart people is appreciated. Dumb people don't require argumentation. It's what I'm realizing. Like you can often just say things and people just accept it at face value depending on who you are, which is perplexing to me because I've never bought that. When someone says, oh, X is true because I say so, and then they point to their degree or they point to their work experience, I'm like, okay, sure, that's not to say that's irrelevant because if you have experience with something, sure, you have experience with it. But if your argument doesn't stand, if it doesn't hold up to argumentation, it's still a bad argument. And I found that this is a really big thing in law school admissions. So I'm not saying don't like listen to me blindly. What I am saying is that I'm actually willing to defend my ideas. And a lot of people that are arguing, like let's just take an example of what's really driven me insane recently, which is this idea of employability being weighed more by law schools, which is true. The US News rankings have shifted. They have minimized how much certain factors matter. I mean, they jigger with the ranking basically every couple of years so that they get different outcomes. Because the thing is, the rankings are very incentivized to have different rankings every year. If it was always the same top 14, if it was always the same top 20, there'd be no point because then no one would care about the rankings. Their whole business model is structured upon people talking about them. So they're incentivized to drum up news, to get clicks, all that good stuff. And that means that they jigger the ranking. So is it really true that the employability is like some long-term shift because US News cares more about employability? I mean, it could be. It's also possible they're just trying to jigger the rankings and they know that if they shift towards employability, it'll get new outcomes. But anyways, let's react to that and say, okay, sure. When the formula has changed, they have increased how much ranking matter, or not ranking. They've increased how much of the ranking depends upon the outcomes, which I actually like. I think outcomes are a much better ranking. What does that mean? If I'm an admissions officer and I'm trying to maximize my ranking, how do I select for that? Do I start looking at resumes a little bit deeper? Maybe a little bit. But fundamentally, the ranking is still driven largely based on bar passage, based on LSAT, based on GPA, and all of these things. Like the LSAT and GPA are huge. You guys, like even though yes, it's only 12%, it is a 12% that really affects everything downstream. It is the only thing they control. Because if we pull up the US News law school ranking formula, which I will pull up right now and I will read it out to you. So instead of me being like, oh, here's what it is, here's what they said. Alrighty, so here's how the ranking works. The first thing is outcomes 10 months after graduation, which is weighted by 33%. Is this something that a school can affect based on who they are admitting? The answer to those of you that actually understand law school is hardly no. Like just because you are getting people that interview better, does that mean that your law school is suddenly going to be respected more by the legal industry? They're not going to realize that people are. So can you get a few kick-ass people who are going to go out and hustle and find jobs? Like, sure, you can get a couple people. But for your 200-person class, maybe you can get 2 to 3 people that are going to overperform by selecting for them in the admissions process. The rest of this is determined based on the procedure of the school and who hires from them. So it's funny to think that they're changing what they're selecting for based on the idea that they're ranked based on outcomes. It's like the outcomes are not changing. The outcomes are pretty static based on how the school is viewed. The same firms are going to hire from them. The same judges are going to hire from them. And the idea that they're suddenly going to be shifted towards like, oh, so-and-so law school has people that interview better, therefore like the ranking is going to shoot up. It's not real. These outcomes are very static year over year. And for a school to change it, they have to change their prestige. And how do they change their prestige? Well, they produce better, competent, more kick-ass attorneys. And the best indicator of that is the incoming LSAT and GPA. Because the incoming LSAT and GPA, while yes, it is an imperfect measurement, it is the best measurement they have access to. This is showing how people stack up in 2 arenas. One, GPA, which is how hard you work over a long period of time. And then the LSAT is how smart you are on one very special test. And I'm not going to say the LSAT is an intelligence test because it's not, but it is a verbal intelligence test. Are you good at words? And it is incredibly correlated with G factor, which for those of you that don't is general intelligence. So the LSAT actually is an IQ test to an extent. People with high IQs do well in the LSAT. Now it's not perfect because you can train it. You can have a low IQ and still do well on the LSAT, but you cannot have a high IQ and just bomb the LSAT. That has been disproven. At least if you like speak the language. Could you speak a different like because of course if you take a Japanese person, you're like, hey, take the LSAT, they could be a genius. They would still bomb it because they don't understand English. But assuming that English is your language, if you are smart, you cannot do bad on the LSAT. That is impossible. Anyway, and assuming you can read, but I would also argue reading is a necessary condition to be intelligent. I guess you could be an illiterate smart person who's really good conceptually at things and bomb the LSAT. But if you are illiterate and you are smart, you will score at least decent on the LSAT. Anyway, so that's the first part, which is 33% of their ranking is outcome 10 months after graduation. The next is bar passage. How do you get high bar passage? Well, if only there was a test that everyone had to take prior to going to law school that might tell people how they're going to perform on a later test. Oh, there is, you say? There's the LSAT, which, while not perfect, is incredibly predictive of bar passage. And some of you might be like, ooh, that's a big claim, incredibly predictive bar passage. The answer is yes, over a certain point. The reality of the bar is that it's not as hard as it's made out to be. Is that we have too many people that are taking the bar. If you look at bar questions, it's knowledge. It's a content-based test. It's not a skills-based test. The reading of the bar is much easier than the LSAT. If you actually look at bar exam questions, which you can just Google them. I've Googled them. I've attempted them, and I've answered most of the questions right, at least multiple choice ones, as someone who never went to law school. Now, that being said, there are a few things that it'll ask you about, like some certain statute, and like having not studied it, you won't know because it's not a skills-based test. The answers are not hidden in the text, because where the LSAT is different is the LSAT has all the answers in the text. The bar doesn't. You have to bring in outside knowledge to do well on the bar, whereas on the LSAT, outside knowledge makes you miss questions. So it is different. However, it is still a large test that studying for and taking seriously matters. You know what else is a large test that studying for and taking seriously matters for? The LSAT. So while not perfect, LSAT scores are pretty predictive of bar passage. Further, they are really predictive on the bottom end. If you are someone below 150, the bar passage failure skyrockets. And this makes sense to me because as someone who has taught LSAT for many years, I will tell you there are only two groups of people that score below 150 on the LSAT after given their full effort. And this is one, legitimately not intellectually gifted people. I don't know how to say this, but there is some percentage of the population that is not smart. And those people struggle with the LSAT. And it's not to be mean, but occasionally I'll talk to someone and it's like, I don't even know how I'd handle it. And it's hard because it's like, I don't want to be the person to say give up on your dream, but part of me is like, this is not the field for you. Like occasionally you get questions about the LSAT and it's showing such a lack of engagement with the text and with the meaning. Like a good example of this is keywords. When someone's like, oh, does the word should or does the word only make this answer wrong? To which the answer is often yes, but then the follow-up answer is, but you can't extrapolate that. That does not apply to other questions. It's about the meaning. And it didn't line up with what we were looking for this time, but it could in another question. So if you are looking for should, only, most, as like to kill answer choices, that's not good enough. You have to understand, what is this question talking about? What is it asking you? And people that are not intellectually gifted often look for these shortcuts, because the reality is that doing what's actually required on the LSAT, which is comprehension, is really hard for them. Because when you're not smart, doing the comprehension is difficult. So that is some subset. The other subset is people that just don't take it seriously. There's a lot of people that really don't take this test seriously, and they also don't do well. I have not met someone who is either decent, I don't mean like smart, I mean like average intelligence. Like you do not have to be a genius to crush the LSAT, or at least we're not talking about crushing the LSAT. We're talking about clearing 150. So if you're of reasonable intelligence and you take the LSAT seriously, as in you study for it consistently for a month or two, you'll get above 150. If you study for a month for an hour a day and you can't get above 150, I think that's concerning. I think that probably means you are missing some intellectual stuff, or you're doing it the entirely wrong way. Which, to be fair, most LSAT prep does it the entirely wrong way. You guys are in the jungle out there. I have way more listeners than work with us, so I will tell you, there are a lot of very bad LSAT preps out there, and it is not correlated with who is popular. Some of the really popular LSAT prep are really bad. So if you ask your buddies at your pre-law organization, like, hey, how'd you study? Or you ask your friend law school, they might give you decent advice. They also might give you bad advice. Just be very careful what you work with. Good news, it's about ideas. So if you're like, hey, man, I don't want to work with you, but I want to still evaluate whether or not my LSAT prep is good, do our free course. It is on our website, heyfuturelawyer.com. You will see how we approach LSAT. And if you're doing it in a bullshit way, you will very quickly realize the difference between how we do it and how they do it. So what I will say is that if you are diagramming anything on logical reasoning, you are doing it the wrong way. If you're focusing on conditional logic, you are doing it the wrong way. If you're focusing on the question types over the content of the passage, you are doing it the wrong way. If you're reading the question first, you are doing it the wrong way. And I mean, with caveats, like I just said all those things very aggressively, but the point is that those things indicate treating this test as a standardized test to be gamed as opposed to a test of skills. And we teach this as a test of skills. We don't teach this as a test of bullshit. If you are a good reader and a good thinker, you don't have to be good at the LSAT. You just are naturally good at the LSAT. Good thinkers and good readers are good at the LSAT. And a lot of people train to be good at the LSAT. That's not what I train people for. I train them to be good readers and good thinkers. And as a byproduct of that, the LSAT becomes really easy because you're good at the underlying skills. So anyways, we're different is we focus on the underlying like methodology, which is reading and thinking. Whereas a lot of LSAT prep is like, okay, you guys are stupid and you can't read. So we're just going to try to mold that onto the LSAT and be like, okay, we're going to assume you're idiots. So we're going to have you diagram a question because, it's really hard to understand these abstract ideas. And in reality, it's a really easy question. They're just like dumbing it down because they know that people are too stupid to slow, or not too stupid, but too stubborn to slow down. Anyway, the point is you guys are in danger out there. And if you can't get a good LSAT score within a month and you're doing it the right way, that probably does indicate that you have low intelligence. Man, that sounds harsh to say, but also like I just don't understand how else to deliver it. If you could be studying the wrong way. If you're like, I have been studying for over a month, I'm still below 150, you could just be doing it the wrong way, which is valid. But anyway, I would just make sure that you're not doing it the wrong way. Okay, yeah. So bar passage. The point is back to this whole point, which is like what determines the ratio or the ranking. Bar passage does, and bar passage is really heavily correlated with the LSAT. And so it also correlates with GPA because you know what the GPA is? It's how seriously you took college. And sure, majors are different. Sure, universities are different. But what's true is that it all requires some level of effort. A 4.0 is not just handed to you at any university. A 3.0 might be. So to get a bar passage, like a GPA is a really good indicator is what I'm trying to say. Because while not perfect, it does show a certain level of preparation and taking things seriously, which will correlate to the bar. So anyways, are they looking at your resume for bar passage for that 18% that really matters? The answer is no, they're not, because how does your resume tell them if you're going to pass the bar? The LSAT and GPA are really good indicators. Anyways, then bar passage, there's another 7% for ultimate bar passage. That earlier 18% was 18% that is driven by your first take. So when you sit down the first time, do you pass or do you have to retake the bar? The next is a peer assessment score. That's 13% from other schools. So if you are, let's say Chicago, it's like, what does Harvard think of you? What does Stanford think of you? That's 13% of your score. That is not affected by employment. That is affected by LSAT and GPA. So just to track so far, we're at 25% is bar passage. Another 25% is assessment scores, 12.5% of which is from other schools. The other 12.5% is from practicing lawyers and judges. So that is another 50% of your score. And I would say that the best way to influence these is to bring in LSAT and high GPAs because those are people that work hard and people that are smart. And if you want to have a good assessment score, how do you do that? Well, you have lawyers that kick ass. And the best way to assess that is that. So far, we have the bar pass, or not bar passage. We have the employment at 1/3, which maybe that is affected by your resume. We just have 50% that clearly fights back to your LSAT GPA. Then we have your median LSAT score and your median undergrad. That's 9%, so it's much smaller, but that still gets us to 59% of the things that are directly or indirectly affected by your LSAT GPA, and we're at 33%. So we're at 59 to 33%. And then acceptance rate is 1%. That's not affected by either. Student to faculty ratio, that's 5%. That's not affected by either. Library resources, 2%. That's not affected by either because those are not driven by the type of people you attract in terms of like employability, nor are they driven by LSAT and GPA. They're just, they are what they are. So what's the takeaway? Well, the takeaway is that 59%, that is the assessment scores by peers and lawyers and judges, as well as the actual LSAT and GPA, as well as bar passage. That is all driven by your LSAT and GPA, at least in terms of the schools that they want to materially impact the ranking. 1/3 of it is the ultimate career outcome, which you could also argue is affected by LSAT and GPA because, the firms want people with high LSATs. They're not explicitly selecting for high LSATs. They're not going to ask you your LSAT score, but they are picking from schools that only take high LSATs. And it's like, why is that? Is it that they want really smart people at their firms? I would wager so. Anyway, the point is that this idea that they're really looking at employability, it is buzz, it is noise, it is not real, as borne out by the data. Like, yes, a good resume will help you, but that was always true. And the idea that it has expanded, because it's not so much the claim that is offensive, it's the implications, which is that, your LSAT and your GPA don't matter so much. Like a high LSAT and high GPA is not enough to get you in if you don't have the supplementals, which has always been true. If you were a psycho or didn't write well, you always got rejected. This is not new. This has always been the case. Further, it gives the implication that, if you don't have a high LSAT or high GPA, but you do have some awesome kick-ass work experience, you're going to get in. And the answer is no, not really. Outside of really odd circumstances, you're still going to get rejected because when you come in, you go into their index formula, which if you all don't know about index formulas, you need to know about index formulas. Schools rank you based on your LSAT and your GPA. And that's it. They put you in a spreadsheet based on that. It is Google law school index numbers, if you don't believe me. It is the biggest, I'd say, black pill of the law school process. They are not looking at you guys as packages. They're looking at you as numbers. And then if you're on the margins, they look a little bit deeper. And sure, they do crazy checks. If you clear their numbers at Harvard, That's not good enough at Harvard. They're still reading you to see if you want you, if they want you. Because remember, at Harvard, they have tons of people that clear the numbers. And that's why the softs matter. It's not because the softs are getting you in, it's because they can't cut people down based on numbers, so they have to cut them down somehow. So they start looking at the essays to cut people down. At most schools, they do not have the luxury of being able to make cuts based on soft factors. They make their cuts based on the numbers because they need to maintain their ranking. And if they start cutting based on their essays, they're going to start losing quality people, which will hurt their ranking and make them lose money, which will get their dean fired. So at the top schools, do soft factors matter? Yes, but giant caveat, only because they have an abundance of high numbers. So if you are a low number person without the softs, with the softs, you're still fucked because you're not in the equation. It is that if you have the high numbers, they have such an abundance that if you're not interested, they can still cut you. It's not that people are getting in over people with higher numbers. It's that people with the same numbers are getting rejected because some of them are more compelling than others. But people will misinterpret this and assume that they are going to get in because they're like, oh, I don't have the numbers, but I have a really compelling story, which once again, it tends to be incredibly overestimated by people. It is not as substantial as people tend to assume. Anyway, I feel like I kind of lost my train of thought there. But yeah, well, let's just do an essay to see what we have. This was submitted in. This is our Mormon friend. For those of you that are longtime listeners, they sent in an updated version of their personal statement, and we're going to read it and just respond to it. I will also be redacting part of it to keep it relatively anonymous. Don't be a psycho and try to find this person. But let's see what they got. And just for reference, this person I believe is a 173.9. So this is someone who is a real contender at all the law schools. Are they likely to get into Harvard? The answer is no. But do they stand a chance? The answer is also yes. So anyway, people really overestimate how hard it is to get in. Like this person will get into multiple T14s if they apply well. I mean, we're about to see their personal statement and we can judge it and see like, is it good, is it bad? I'll give it actually a 120 to 180 score at the end. I think that's kind of a good way to do personal statements, just to match it up. But let's see. So anyways, so-and-so's little brother, in quotes, is how it opens, which I don't like that opening. Your personal statement is a pitch for you. And so far, we are seeing you as someone's little kid brother, which is not a reason to admit you to law school. This is you are a little kid, which is not how I want to see you. I want to see you as kicking ass. Now, I bet you're going to pivot from this into like growing or something, but I don't want to see you as a little kid. I want to see you as kicking ass. And so far, you are someone's little brother. They continue. That's what people called me growing up, like I was just an afterthought. Yeah, and I'm already thinking of you as an afterthought. Lead with kicking ass. Do not lead with this like growth story. I don't want to see you as a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. I just want to see you as a butterfly. I don't need the cocoon. I don't need the metamorphosis. I just want you to kick ass. So far, not loving it. They continue. I wondered if anyone really knew me, or if I was just a kid who tagged along behind his older brother at the basketball start. Save that for therapy. I don't care about your like personal issues. I care why you're going to kick ass for law school. And that's not it. That's like, oh, people, like I was an afterthought. Like that sucks. I feel for you. Also, I don't care. This is law school. Your personal, that's for you and your therapist, not for you in the law school. They continue. I wasn't the strongest or most popular, often bullied for my skinny frame. Once again, does not belong here. Those years were hard and at times lonely. Okay, so we're one paragraph in. What have we learned about our friend? We have learned that they are someone's little brother. They have unresolved struggles. They might not be unresolved, but the point is like you had issues in school, as many kids do. These are not reasons to admit you to law school. We're one paragraph in. I've been given no reasons to admit you to law school. That's a problem. I need reasons to admit you to law school from the start. And we just have not gone there. Anyway, let's continue. As I got older, I shed some of the labels others had given me, but the question of identity continued to linger beneath the surface. I do not care about your identity. I need you to kick ass. We are 5 sentences in, and you have not given a reason to admit you to law school. I was no longer trying to be someone else, but I hadn't quite figured out who I was. Right? You just said that. That's a redundant sentence. Even if I like the idea, which I don't, but even if I did, that sentence does not help. I don't want you to be someone else. I want you to be kicking ass. And this whole idea of like what you've perceived yourself to be or how others have perceived you versus who you want to be, I don't care. I want you to be a kick-ass future lawyer. I'm not seeing you as that. I'm seeing you as someone who's kind of insecure. That's really all I've learned about you. You grew up in someone's shadow, which like I get is that's probably true to your story, but I don't care. They continue. This tension deepened when I left behind the comfort of familiarity to serve a 2-year religious mission in southern Chile. All right, so we got a Mormon. I'm kidding. But we all know who tends to go on missions. It tends to be the Mormons or LDS if you are one of the tribe. Anyway, so yeah, you went to a mission. I will also note law schools do not tend to be the most in favor of the Mormons. I'm not going to say you'll be discriminated against, but I'm also going to say you won't not be discriminated against. It'll depend on the school. But the Mormons are not exactly seen as like what the law schools are looking for. No offense. I just want to be like very real with you. Like this will be at some school, like obviously at BYU, it's a point in your favor because BYU loves the Mormons because they are the Mormons. At Harvard, they tend to have a bit of a, I'd say, coastal elite sneer. Sneer is the right word, S-N-E-E-R. Like they kind of look down at religious people, especially the Mormons. Anyway, Um, so we continue. Amid government-imposed lockdowns and growing uncertainty, I walked miles each day in a mask-covered world, looking for ways to help others while still trying to understand my own place in the world. So yeah, once again, you're growing, but now you're in Chile. You're trying to like figure out who you are while you're on a mission in Chile. Yeah, I mean, I get it. Also, like, I don't care. This is not you kicking ass. This is you as like a, I'm gonna assume like a 19 or 20-year-old kid, and you're off doing your Mormon proselytizing, trying to spread the good word of Joseph Smith, which is fine and all. But also, I mean, some schools will not like it, so there is some risk to it. But also, I mean, at most schools it'll be a bubble again. It's fine. And for what's worth, the missions are nice. Like you guys are doing good work along with trying to convert people to your religion. But that's besides the point. What I will say is that this isn't a point to admit you to law school. You're in a different country. You're going through some growth, and that's cool and all. But I don't care. I just want to see the finished product. I don't want to see the whole cocoon. And right now, I'm learning a lot about the cocoon. They continue. In partnership with local agencies and churches, I helped organize food drives across cities, distributed essential goods, and built lasting relationships with families struggling to survive. Yeah, that's nice. You guys are helping out in Chile during COVID. I do like that. That is actually you doing something. What I mean, to be fair, this is not probably you being the driving force. This is probably you participating in the Mormon church stuff, which is not bad per se, but also it's not you like I decided to run the church drive. It's like you're a Mormon missionary and the Mormon church is, which is good and all. But also it's very different from like, did you take action versus like, were you part of an organization where you were like kind of given marching orders and you went out and you executed on those marching orders? It's a different situation. So far we're 2 paragraphs in, about half a page. And is this the worst? Like, honestly, this is better than the average personal statement because the average personal statement is that bad. So far, I'm saying we're at like a 158. Like, it's above average, but also there's not a lot of reason to admit you to law school, which to be fair is most people's. Most people's personal statements suck. This one is not good. Like, in fact, I think you had a better version. I'm surprised this is the one you ended up on. But let's continue. One evening, I sat at the worn wooden table of a family of 5. Cool. The father, recently laid off, insisted on sharing what little food they had. Yeah, so it's like Chilean hospitality. That's very nice. I've been helping him learn English, and during those lessons, he shared some of his stories of how his small business had been shut down due to government corruption. Okay, sure. So Chile has a corrupt government. I didn't know that, but also that it's not crazy to hear. Like, I'm willing to believe that. They continue. He had dreams of reopening, of giving his children more, but each time he tried, he repeatedly encountered institutional barriers. I could help with English, but not much more. That powerlessness frustrated me. Though we came from different worlds, I too had known what it was like to be overlooked. Okay, so I hate this analogy of being overlooked. Like, once again, I don't want to see you as like the insecure little caterpillar. I want to see you as the big, beautiful, kicking ass Mormon butterfly. So anyway, let's really cut the whole insecurity aspect. I get where it comes from, and it might be authentically you. Like, I have all sorts of stuff that I could talk about, as we all do, because we've all gone through stuff. But you don't lead with your not favorable attributes. You lead with what kicks ass. Like, we all have things that would be good in personal stamps. We all have things that would be bad in personal stamps. And we all have things that I would just consider oversharing. This idea of like your growth or kind of growing up from the shadow, like I'm willing to understand it. Like, I hear you. And I get that. Also, that's not relevant. And it does not belong in this document. So I really cut this whole theme. It's also worth noting that this is titled, the title of the document is personal statement dash invisible theme. So it feels like you're really trying to hit this intentionally. It's funny, like while you're trying to do this intentionally, and you probably think this is good. This is a great example of Dunning-Kruger. This is not a good personal statement. And it's not bad because it's well written. Paragraphs are short. It's grammatically correct, which is better than many people's. But the content is ultimately lacking. I'm not like, oh man, is this person going to kick ass in a legal career? I'm like, whatever. They're an insecure kid, which is fine. But is that the impression you want to be giving? Do you want to be the insecure kid? Or do you want to be, this guy's going to be a legal monster who's going to go kick ass and take names and just absolutely obliterate anyone in his way? That's what I want. So let's continue. So you're listening to this Chilean father who's lost his business. Let's see what's up. Listening to him, I felt something shift. Don't say that. I don't care. For the first time, I began to understand that being overlooked is much more than just being quad or skinny. Also, don't say that. Sometimes it's about how the systems around you, structures that keep entire families invisible no matter how hard they fight. All right, sure, yeah, systems can keep you down. Also, like, I mean, that could come off as naive. Like, you're just now noticing this as like a 19-year-old. Yeah, and then further, I just don't care. It's not what you've done. It's like you're observing the world. I don't want to see you observing. I want to see you taking action. So I don't love that. They continue. I saw my friend, a version of my younger self, trying to be seen, trying to matter. But in his case, unlike mine, the stakes were survival. This moment didn't offer closure. It offered clarity. Don't say that. Well, I couldn't fix everything. I could do something. Yeah, but what did you do? Like, that's the whole point I'm trying to get to is like, what have you done? You're just talking about like what you're interested in, which I don't know. It's just not interesting. When I returned to the US, I decided to study finance, believing that economic frameworks can be one of the greatest vehicles for driving meaningful change. Yeah, agreed. Also, I don't care. How does that relate to law school? You're getting an econ major or maybe a business major? Like, what? You're applying to law school here. Finance 304 does not make you a kick-ass lawyer. Everyone has graduated college that's applying to law school. It's just not interesting. They continue. As I continued to learn, it became evident that finance alone couldn't address the root of what I'd seen. Okay, so this is what I mean by I often tell people why law is not the prompt for your personal statement. The personal statement prompt that they should give you or that you should answer is why will I kick ass in law school? And this is someone who's very clearly answered why law school. I don't care why law school because you have not presented a case for yourself. Do I understand why you're going to law school? I do. But honestly, I didn't care why you're going to law school because you're applying to law school. It's a given. I don't need to understand like your meaning. And I get that you're going to go, oh, like I have struggled myself with like advocacy or not advocacy, but like, who I am. I saw this man in Chile struggle. I realized systems hold people down. I'm going to fight systems. And I get now why you're going to law school. Also, I kind of don't care. I don't care why you're going to law school. I care why you're going to kick ass because I'm not here to decide, have you thought this through? I'm here to decide, do you get admitted to my law school? And have you answered the question, is this like a thought out decision? Sure, I guess. But I kind of don't care. I don't care if the decision is thought out. I care, are you going to kick ass? Are you going to succeed? Are you going to raise our prestige? So when I go to the rankings and the judges and the peer schools look at our law school, they see us as a school of kick-ass attorneys. And whether or not you have been a little caterpillar of like insecurity and now you're a butterfly of braveness and helping people out, that is not what they're going to be making their rankings based on. They're going to make their rankings based on, does this person kick ass? So this is what I mean by the why law essay is often fucked up. This is a good example of that. You have answered why law and you have written a weak essay based on that. Anyway, they continue. The man I sat with at that wooden table didn't just need capital, he needed a system that wouldn't block his efforts. Okay, sure, I guess, but I don't care. That's when I came to see law as the path forward. So yeah, it's very clearly addressing why law, which we just don't care about. But they continue. I pursued this conviction and landed an internship with the Utah County Attorney's Office. Just start here. Just talk about what you did at the Utah County's Attorney's Office. Like, is it crazy? Probably not. Did you probably do shit? Like, yeah, you probably did. Talk about that's way better than the caterpillar. I don't care about the caterpillar, and you've been all about the caterpillar. They continue. Working alongside lawyers, I supported case preparation by analyzing legal precedent and assisting in client interactions. Yeah, I go into more detail, but I like it. Within a week of reviewing cases, my outlook on the court would change. Do not talk about your outlook, just talk about what you did. Fewer opinions, more what you did. Researching the law became familiar, yet behind each file, I saw people, not pages. That feels very generic. Like, what? Can you give an example? He's future dependent on whether the system saw them clearly and treated them fairly. All right, so I'm going to stop here just because it's more of the same. It's very generic and trite now. This is a good example of why law is not a good prompt. You guys fuck it up when you put why law. They do not care why you're going to law school. Like, I know they say they do. It is not true. Think about it from their perspective. If I am a law school admissions officer reading essays, who am I going to be attracted to? I'm going to be attracted to people that look like they're about to go kick ass and take names. Has this person convinced me that they've thought through law school? It seems authentic. I believe you. I think you genuinely want to help people and you decided finance is not the career, law is the career. That's cool. Also, I'm left and I'm just like, I don't care. Like, it's not interesting. If I was admitting you to my law school, this is not a reason to kick ass. You seem like a pretty generic 20-year-old kid. And that's fine, but that's the impression you give off. Like, I'm a 20-year-old kid with like wide eyes and I want to go change the world. And I'm a little insecure still, but I'm gonna do good and I'm gonna fight the good fight. And I don't want that. I want someone who's gonna be a legal monster and just obliterate whoever's in their face. I want to see you doing stuff at the attorney's office. I want to see you kicking ass. I want to see you winning cases. And sure, I know it's an internship, so it's the craziest stuff. Probably not, but you did review cases. What did you do? Did you identify something that helped win something? Like, anyway, it's not, I do not care about your origin. And you guys really focus on stuff that doesn't matter. This is a good example of why law is. And anyway, I'm kind of getting repetitive here, but this is a great example of like ultimate verdict, like 155, slightly above average. It's well written, which is a point in your favor, but this is not a strong statement. The content is very weak, lacking. This, like, I would have you rewrite it entirely. Also, it felt a little ChatGPT. I don't think it was ChatGPT, but it felt generic. And that is what is drawing me to ChatGPT. There was a lot of it's not X, it's Y, which is a very common pattern of ChatGPT. There's only one M dash, but to be fair, you could have just removed the M dashes. You had a lot of semicolons, which I think people might often do in lieu of an M dash. So I would be careful. This is just not what I submit. Further, like, we lead with you being a kid. Also, not to nitpick, but your header is Times New Roman, except for the page number, that is Arial. And you should change that. That should be the same font. I know it's a little different in the header, but you do want to make sure. Because like I, as a really nitpicky, dorky person, I pick that up. Admissions officers will likely pick that up, and it does make them think just slightly less of you. So keep it consistent. Do not have Arial as a page number. Yes, you have to edit it separately than the header, which is annoying. But that's, lawyers do these things. They don't let small things miss. Like when people are like, oh, you missed a comma, that's pedantic. It's like, yeah, but lawyers are pedantic. So anyway, verdict, pretty average person statement. You guys just heard it. It was, I don't know, it was fine, but I'm left like very like, wow, like that's like whatever. Like whether or not we take you or not take you, it's kind of indifferent to me. And that's not the impression you want the reader with. We want the reader left with, oh my God, we need this person, make a spot for them. And that's not what I got. What I got was like, sure, whatever. I guess they're applying to law school. This is about what I expected. And anyways, so be strong, be powerful. We're going to do the Man, should I do admissions? You guys certainly need it, but I don't want to. Yeah, I don't really want to do admissions. Anyway, if you want your personal statement absolutely obliterated, send them to the show. It should be a fun time. It'll be done with love and care and all the goodness in the world. Otherwise, I'll see you all next week. I have a lot to go off to film. Should be a good one because I'm excited to do the consulting recaps once I actually do my preparation, as opposed to just trying to do it off the dome like I did today. So see you then. If you enjoyed what we talked about today or learned something new, please leave a review or a rating. It really does help us out and helps us reach more people. If you have a question or anything you want talked about in the world of LSAT or law school admissions, you can always email support@heyfuturelawyer.com to get it in the podcast agenda. Just put podcast in the subject and we will talk about it on the show. Alrighty, that's all we have for today. So I will see you all next time.